Malaysian political leaders meet this evening as the King begins interviewing more than 220 MPs on who should lead the country. The Malaysian government is in limbo after Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's shock resignation yesterday.
But it appears to be business as usual for the 94-year-old who returned to work today as the interim leader. And for a closer look at the developments out of Malaysia, we're joined by Ibrahim Sufyan, Program Director of the Merdeka Centre. Ibrahim, thanks for joining us. So, what could possibly come out from the King's meeting with the members of Parliament?
Well, I understand that the King has started interviewing all of the members of Parliament. This is a process that will take place over the next 2 days, today as well as tomorrow. And I think the King is trying to ascertain the level of support they have for the different candidates vying to become Prime Minister. From what we understand, a couple of things were potentially asked. Which individual they prefer as Prime Minister, and also whether or not they favor a snap election. These are, unconfirmed information. But I think out of this process, the King hopes to determine, which particular leader commands the majority support within the Parliament, and that he then, when he's satisfied, he can then call upon the individual to be sworn in as Prime Minister. And this is partly because the Parliament is not in session, so you can't have the show of hands that one would normally have in a normal parliamentary sitting.
And what would that mean for the different coalitions and the different parties?
Well, I think the coalitions right now are in a state of flux, partly because, Prime Minister, or rather Dr. Mahathir's party has left the Pakatan Harapan coalition, so they're now out of it as a standalone party. So the status there is unclear, and yet the remainder of the Pakatan Harapan coalition is still there. So Mr. Anwar Ibrahim's party, PKR, the DAP, as well as Amanah is still there. And I think what needs to be established within this process is which members of Parliament support, whether Dr. Mahathir or Mr. Anwar Ibrahim as a parliamentary candidate. And then out of that, whoever that wins majority support then can form a cabinet and then can pull together coalition political parties to form a coalition.
All right, so saying that, what are Anwar Ibrahim's chances of being the next Prime Minister? What are his chances of actually leading and pulling together this new cabinet?
I think the chances is still there. However, I think he does have a bit of a disadvantage, partly because Dr. Mahathir is interim PM. And many other party leaders are flocking or trying to speak to him, possibly negotiating support in return for positions and so forth. And Mr. Anwar, does have some support, but it remains to be seen whether or not he can convert that into majority support within the Parliament and then become Prime Minister. So I think it's still out there. I can't say for certain what his chances are, but I think Dr. Mahathir has an advantage.
Well, speaking of Dr. Mahathir, he has remained silent so far, apart from his tweet this morning saying it's just another day in the office with an accompanying picture. Now, what do you make of sort of his silence since that sort of bombshell that he dropped about his resignation?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of speculation swirling around Kuala Lumpur, as people here are so used to the political drama that comes with Malaysian politics. A lot of people are speculating that there's some kind of deals and also some kind of orchestration happening behind the scenes. But I think what really is transpiring today is that besides making that tweet, we also know that different party leaders have met with the Prime Minister. We know that the leaders of the Gabungan Parti Sarawak met with the Prime Minister today and subsequently issued a statement saying they support his leadership. So I think a number of things are happening behind the scenes, and that the tweet that has come out is meant to assure people that the government is running, that he is carrying out his duties as usual.
Well, speaking of the government running and he's carrying out his duties as usual, how will this political development or turmoil, shall we say, affect the various states? For instance, we're hearing about Johor and Malacca. How is it going to affect states like that?
Well, I think the states are also, I think, going to be impacted by any kind of realignment of the political parties at the national level. With the departure of Bersatu from Pakatan Harapan, a number of states like Kedah, Johor, and now potentially Malacca are now seeing signs of changes in government. It remains to be seen over the next few days whether or not this will transpire, because I think the national government sets the tone for state governments. If at some point there is an accommodation between Dr. Mahathir's party and the rest of the parties that are supporting his leadership, then I think the situation will stabilize. I think right now there's a lot of developments that are occurring by people taking opportunity with the lack of clarity at the national level. So trying to usurp power and also to take control before things fall in place. So there's a lot of movement happening in different states. But I think in the coming days and weeks, the situation will stabilize. It does go to show, however, that coalition politics here in Malaysia does come with some risk, that while one makes a move at the national level, it will also have an impact at state governments, because at the end of the day, no single party commands a large majority. They all need partners in order to govern together.
Well, thank you very much for that analysis on what's actually happening in Malaysia and the political turmoil. We've been speaking with Ibrahim Sufian, Program Director of Merdeka Center.